grew up in Las Vegas during the late 90s to early 2000s. We were there for about 12, maybe 13 years, living everywhere from Northtown to Henderson because my dad couldn't keep a job. My dad's unreliable history is the reason we ended up in the situation my story is going to be about. I'm not going to disclose any names because the guy in question is no longer incarcerated, and his affiliates are not the kind you want to show up on your doorstep. My dad ended up meeting a guy who promised him the easy life, meaning he was a total crook. He stole money from the elderly, from those on death row, and random strangers' mailboxes, checks and stuff, you know. And because of all this, we had it pretty good. I wasn't exactly aware of what was going on or why we ended up in such a nice neighborhood, upper middle class, gated apartments with a pool and activity room. I was really depressed back then, and I went where my family went and didn't really care where it was. I was just trying to get through high school, Las Vegas Academy. I didn't fit in and I hated it, but I was determined to get through it anyway. So, I had to get up before sunset to catch the bus in order to get to school, like at 4 o'clock. My bus stop was at the elementary school, a couple of blocks away. I wasn't concerned. I probably should have been, but I used to walk from the budget suites in the casino. I don't actually remember what it was, but it was on Boulder Highway, and despite the occasional solicitor or yell from a passing car, I'd never really gotten into trouble there. Looking back now, I can say that it wasn't luck. But anyway, one day, I noticed that one of the few cars that passed in front of the elementary school was way too irregular and acting really odd. I don't know how long he had been watching me, and he never stopped, but he just passed me real slow. So I thought maybe I was being paranoid, until one day he actually did stop. He rolled down the window and told me to get in the car, and obviously I shook my head, and I told him no. So he, not turning off the car, got out and circled around to where I was standing. He reached out for my arm, and I yelled for him to leave me alone. Surprisingly, he did. Maybe he was worried that I would draw attention to him and what was going on, but he got back into his car and just drove away. And naturally, I told my dad after I got home from school, and within a few days, the guy was gone. Problem solved, right? Well, a few years later, I found out what had happened to the guy. My dad's affiliates had a friend, and this friend was not good news. In short, there are a lot of bodies buried out in the desert outside of Vegas. Dad got us out of that situation pretty soon after, and this guy ended up going to prison, and I haven't seen my dad for years. Probably won't ever see him again. A good riddance for that. I'm 26 now and in college, working, and I figure it's a story worth telling. And the reason I'm telling this is because I almost regret telling my dad about that guy. You can go too far in getting back at someone. Something bad probably happened to him, but it's too late to know now. If I had just called the police, maybe I wouldn't be so haunted about it now. I thank God every day that I got to where I am now. It was a horrible situation, and many things could have gone wrong for me, but I managed to get through it, and now nothing is the same. Life's good now. I was about 6 or 7 years old when this happened. I remember my grandmother picking me up from school early that day. I used to fake sick all the time to get away from being bullied at school. Needless to say, I was always made fun of for being more feminine than the other kids, and living in West Tennessee wasn't the best place for a little queer boy like myself. But this is irrelevant to my story. Whenever my grandmother would pick me up from school, we would almost always go to McDonald's. It's right by the interstate, and since we lived 30 minutes away from my school district, a snack was necessary. If we had time, she would let me play in the huge play place complexes. You know, the ones with the pink spiraling slide, that super high suspended netted bridge. She knew right away that I wasn't sick, and I fessed up that some kids had been calling me fag and were threatening to beat me up at recess, so I made myself vomit in the hallway on the way back from lunch. I didn't throw up on command, though. I put a gross concoction of whatever was left of my lunch tray into my mouth and masticated the food, but held it in my mouth to spit up so I could really convince the teacher that I was sick. And it worked. That being said, though, I was very hungry, and a chicken McNugget and a cold Coke were the only things that could hit the spot. Nanny, what I call my grandma, she felt bad and decided to let me play by myself in the play place while she was ordering my food. A big mistake. I was young and very naive. I would literally be your best friend regardless of who or what you were. It wasn't until later in life when I got my wits about me. I walked into the play place and there was a man sitting at the lower entry to the complex, the one closest to the small green slide for the little kids. He had a red, close-shaven beard and a receding hairline. He shot me a smile and waved me over as I was walking in. Note, school is in session and no one is in the play area room. I was thrilled that I had someone to play with, though. I was a stupid moron. I walked up to him like a sheep with a death wish. He said, "Hey buddy, did you want to go in here and play follow the leader with me?" I told him yes, and he turned around quickly and entered the complex. I followed him, but he was really fast. I could hear the loud shuffling of his large adult body navigating the small plastic tubes. He was going higher. I figured that he was probably going to the pink slide at the very top of the structure, so I tried to find a better way to beat him there. I make my way across the netted bridge and around the 180-degree turn to see the green tube that goes up to the pink slide. For some reason, I start getting little chill bumps all over and just generally kind of creeped out. It was like some sort of primal sense that had suddenly turned on and I was awake. Stupidly, I began inching my way forward, though, to play follow the leader, which obviously I'm not very good at. As I got up the green tube, I could see half of him in a crouched position at the landing in the pink slide. He says, "Aren't you going to follow me?" I lean closer to move up the tube when I hear Nanny screaming my name. She had a sense of concern that I had never heard in her voice before. I looked up and see the man's smile go to an expressionless face. His hand waving forward moves back down on the mat and he just looks at me. I look at him and for a second, I felt something more sinister than a game was being played. I turned around and bolted to the other side of the compound, expecting him to be hot on my trail, but he wasn't. I made it to the exit that you had to climb down the platforms to get out of the complex. I could see Nanny and a few employees standing in the play area. She asked me what was going on. She had seen a man moving through the structure and knew that I was in there alone. I told her that I was playing follow the leader and that I was fine, and I actually wanted to go back and finish playing at this point, despite the way I just felt. I was such an idiot. And then he told the employees that adults should not be playing in there with children if they don't have any of their own, and grabbed me by my arm and left. I did get my nuggets in the end, but we didn't get to go back to that McDonald's for like a month. Looking back on it all, I can't believe how stupid I was and the potential danger I put myself in. This McDonald's was right off of Interstate 40, and that guy could have been up to some nefarious shit. Let me start off by saying that you can believe what you want about all of this, but I promise that every bit of it is true. I've always been the type of girl to like things that scare me. Horror movies and novels are always my go-to. However, because of this, I'm also pretty paranoid sometimes, and I always have my guard up. I was 15 at the time, and my mum and dad took the weekend to get away, leaving me at the house. I wasn't too uneasy with it, being that I had been home alone multiple times before this, and the thought of having the house to myself was actually pretty exciting. My parents gave me a 10-minute lecture on why I couldn't invite friends over and how I wasn't allowed to throw parties while they were gone and so on. I wasn't the typical teenage girl wanting to throw parties or invite friends over without my parents' permission, so I thought the whole speech my parents gave me seemed pretty irrelevant. They finally decided to leave, and I made the decision to work on my homework while watching some television. An hour went by and my phone started to buzz. I looked at the number and quickly answered it, after realizing that it was my best friend Avery. She asked if she could hang out that night, but I told her my parents were out of town and that I wouldn't be able to. Skype had just come out earlier that year, so we decided to do a video chat for a bit. Our conversation started up as the usual. How are you? How was your day? What have you been up to? I remember explaining how worried I'd been about this biology assignment, due on Monday. Avery seemed a little uncomfortable though, so I asked her, "Hey, are you okay?" Me? Yeah, I just thought that you said your parents weren't home." I was confused. "Yeah, they aren't." I laughed. "But I just saw your dad on your back deck." I stopped smiling and a cold, empty feeling washed over me. My mum was telling me not to look behind me, but my curiosity took control. I slowly turned around, expecting to see some guy creepily staring at me through my back window, but no one was there. I turned around and gave Avery a stare. "I thought you were being serious for a minute. Avery, don't do that." But she swore up and down that she was. Well, I had no other choice but to take her word for it, so I told her I was going to log off and check out the situation. I got up after ending the call and made some coffee for myself. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. What, a 15-year-old drinks coffee? Anyways, after grabbing a cup for myself, I started looking through the window which views my back deck. To my knowledge, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, so I just tried telling myself that Avery was seeing things. I plopped back on the couch and turned the TV back on, pretty loud this time too. Just as my adrenaline and paranoia started to die down, they were quickly inflamed by the sound of my basement door opening. The door, no matter how slowly or quietly you try to make it, always makes a loud squeak whenever you open or close it. I paused my show and listened. My heart stopped when I heard the basement door closing, and I knew that this wasn't my imagination. My heart started to race, and my mum was playing every possible scenario in my head. I grabbed a kitchen knife and my home telephone, and then proceeded to tiptoe into my bedroom and lock the door. I called 911 without question, and was soon online with a dispatcher. She calmly told me to stay in my room, and that the cops would be there shortly. I live right down the road from a police station, so I was expecting them to be there in a matter of seconds. But to be honest, it felt so much longer. I could see a cop car from my window, so I unlocked my door and ran out of the house. The two cops told me to wait outside and cautiously walked into the house. About 5 minutes go by and I was finally greeted by the two policemen again. They told me that there was no one in the house and that there was no sign of any break-in, being that all the doors and the windows were locked. I was completely stunned and still visibly shaken up. I know I heard the door open and close. The cops questioned me, making sure the call I made was serious, and I told them that it was, and they left, telling me to call back if I heard or saw anything suspicious again. A week went by and my parents were back from their trip. I told them everything the second they got home. My mum was upset at me for not telling her as soon as it happened, but hugged me and was thankful that I was all right. One night, while sleeping, I woke up around 3 a.m. My mouth was extremely dry, so I decided to get some water. Making my way back to my bedroom, I get a disturbing feeling. I brush it off and set my water glass down on my end table. I crawled back into bed, rolled on my side and closed my eyes. For a moment, I was relaxed. That is, until I heard the sound of my bedroom door slowly opening. My eyes open and follow the door until it slowly hits the wall. I was staring at the door, not knowing what to think, until I felt a breath on the back of my neck that made my blood run cold. My eyes shot open, and I couldn't move my arms or my legs for what I believed was out of fear. But then, I felt something run up and down the middle of my back, in line with my vertebrae. It stopped, and an arm reached around into my view and wrapped around my waist slowly. The breathing got louder and closer. It felt as if a pair of lips was about to touch my ear. I started to sob quietly. It felt like hours had gone by when all of a sudden the arm and the breathing disappeared simultaneously. I felt a cold, dreary breeze cover me, but the feeling dissipated about as quickly as it came over me. I don't know what to call this, or if this has anything to do with the man that Avery saw in our basement, but I'm pretty open to paranormal beliefs. But that wouldn't explain the man or my locked basement door. And I felt as if someone really did touch me and breathe on me. I still get an eerie feeling every time I walk into my room. I feel like I'm being watched. A good few years ago, when I was quite a bit younger and still religious, I went on a camping trip with a good friend from my church. During the trip, I was going to be sleeping in my own tent while he slept with his father and sister in a larger tent. That first night was the only night I camped, which is sad because we had planned to camp for a whole week. I would like to note that the day was really fun. We gathered our gear and made for Oasis State Park, and it was a great time. Me and my friend, we'll call him Ryan, spent the whole day playing after we set up our tents. We brought our Nintendo DS's and played on those for a few hours before getting bored and decided to explore the campgrounds. We spotted a snake getting a drink from the pond next to our tent, and the snake wasn't even hostile. It just finished getting a drink and vanished into the prickly leaves of a yucca. We even found some small sand dunes to play on and explore. The day was, all in all, amazing. I had the privilege of spending a whole day with my friend in this exciting new place, and his sister didn't even bother us for most of the day. However, night soon fell, and after some barely spooky stories from Ryan's uncreative father, we retired to our tents. At some point in the night, I woke up and needed to use the restroom. That wasn't the first time that night that I had woken up needing to go, as was evident from a soaked sapling 6 feet from my tent. However, this time was a little different, as I wasn't pooing on a small tree. The restroom was only a 2-minute walk from our specific campsite, and I was prepared to make that trek. As a rule, I've always been very paranoid, and was on edge already as I heard coyote howls earlier that night. So, thinking like a stupid little kid, I only unzipped the tent window cover, thinking that the nylon net outside would protect me from a vicious relative of the dog. The coast had appeared at first to be clear, and I was about to unzip my tent when a very loud and very close howl sounded out from behind my tent. I froze, with my hand on the zipper, as I heard the crunching of something walking past my tent. The crunching was louder than a person, and sounded more like scrapping, as if a clawed creature were walking instead of a human with shoes. And sure enough, that thought was validated as a huge hulking shadow lumbered into view, approaching the tree I had urinated on. It was huge and dark, with broad shoulders and what looked like Batman ears from behind. In my childlike innocence, I actually briefly thought that somebody dressed like Batman, without a cape, had walked past my tent. It was then that I noticed discrepancies in the shape of the figure. There was a lot of space between the arms and the torso, as if it was holding its arms out to the side, not to mention the fact that the arms extended way farther down than normal human arms would. Its legs also appeared strange from behind, and were accented by a definitely inhuman bushy tail. It then leaned down, a faint snapping coming from its legs as it neared all fours. Once bent over, it sniffed the tree with long deep inhales. Its ears flicked, appearing fuzzy in the moonlight as it seemed to pick up on the sound. I realized then that I had been making zero attempt to hide my breathing, and in the shock of the moment, I clapped my hand to my mouth. The sound of my slapping my hand on my mouth only made it worse, causing the beast to quickly spin on its middle to look at me. Slowly, really slowly, it turned the rest of its body. I looked it up and down in growing fear. I realized that the weird shape of its arms was caused by them being half bent and raised slightly. The arms ending in vicious claws that wouldn't have even so much as noticed my tent if it had decided to try and kill me. The weird shape of its legs, also obvious to me now, were jointed like a dog's. It seemed hunched forward, even as it tried to straighten to appear bigger than it was. And then I noticed its head. Its jaw was large and long, but narrow, as fur drifted off to either side of its face. The muzzle glinted pale white in contrast to a shiny black nose that wiggled as it breathed in my scent. Those ears were perched on its head like a Doberman, pointy and small and directly on top of its head. But above all else, I noticed its eyes. Have you ever looked into the eyes of a predator and known that you were the prey? Have you ever looked into the eyes of a monster, be it a human or a wolf or a bear, and known that it had power? Have you ever felt that feeling of pure dread that comes with being lower on the food chain for the first time in your life? I saw those eyes, and in them, I saw it acknowledge that very feeling, as if it could smell it on me. For all I know, maybe it could smell my very fear. Or maybe it just smelt me shit my pants. I hate to mention that now, but after sitting in such a presence and feeling the lack of power that I had, there was no way that it was staying in now. But then, in the most unexpected turn of events, it just left. It just turned around and left. It made me fear death, and it made me realize my place, and then it just walked away. It fully lowered to all fours, growling, almost like it was acknowledging its power. The popping sound from before came back louder than it had originally, as if fully lowering down was worse on its leg joints than bending over, and then it turned and just left. Needless to say, I didn't leave for the restroom. I found a way to clean up in my tent. The next day, I pretended to be sick and got Ryan's dad to call my mum to pick me up early. G'day mates, it's Busta here. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks again to the Hive members that bravely shared their stories for us all here, and I hope you guys are all doing really well. For the chance to have your story feature in a video, you can send your story to my email, which is in the description below. If you would like more scary stories too, you can click on the card at the top right of your screen or on one of the annotations on your screen right now. As always guys, it would be awesome if you could like, share, comment, and subscribe if you're new. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for updates throughout the week. And also, if you would like content early and completely advert-free for as little as $1 a month, feel free to click on the link to my Patreon account and sign up there for regular MP3 format stories. Thanks again for tuning in and for all the love as always, guys, and I'll see you mates in the next one.